Here's why the Atlanta Braves need to extend Spencer Schwellenbach. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, October 30th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at CrosbyBaseball. You can follow the show on Twitter at Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of the written work on BravesToday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. It is both a podcast and a newsletter. And while we're waiting for the World Series to conclude before guys officially become free agents, and a reminder of the timeline there, you become a free agent the day after the World Series. 5 days after the World Series is when, one, all of your decisions are due as far as club options, things like that, as well as when you can start signing outside free agents, but internal guys can be signed at any time. You can be signing guys right now if you want to. It would just technically be a contract extension instead of a new free agent contract. Again, those can start the day after the World Series. And on the note of contract extensions, there are a few different reasons why I think the Atlanta Braves need to give a contract extension, the AA special, to rookie pitcher Spencer Schwellenbach. This idea was floated, I believe it was Joel Reuter of Bleacher Report. He put this in one of his off-season hot take prediction kind of article things that he put out recently. And I want to tell you, one, why Spencer Schwellenbach needs to be extended from a player perspective, from a performance perspective. I want to tell you why Alex Anthopoulos would consider doing it and some potential risk factors that may make him not do it, as well as probably talk about what the deal could look like from a financial perspective. But let's get to Spencer Schwellenbach himself first. Okay? What he did this year was, I'm going to argue, unexpected. Okay? Atlanta obviously thought he could handle the major leagues when they promoted him, or else they wouldn't have brought him up from AA. I was one of the people going into the year, I had him as my AJ Smith-Shawver type of rapid ascent through the minors and make his major league debut. I did not have him as starting 21 games in the regular season and being the dude you would turn to clinch a postseason spot and all of that stuff. I did not think he would be this good this quickly. And I think that's part of the argument here for extending Spencer Schwellenbach. So what he did, 21 games in the majors. He went 8-7 with a 3.35 ERA, covered 123 and 2/3 innings, only walked 23 while striking out 127. So that was less than 2 walks per 9 innings, while striking out 9.2 guys per 9 innings. And he gave up 14 home runs, which was exactly 1 home run per 9 innings pitched. Now, this is after he started in the minors. He made 6 starts in High A Rome and 2 starts in Double A Mississippi. So he threw 45 minor league innings. In those, he went 4-1 with a 1.80 ERA. His combined workload was a 168 and 2/3 innings. His previous high was 2023 when he pitched 65. And the way that this worked is he was a shortstop at Nebraska. In 2021, he also served as the team's closer. He pitched 31 and 2/3 innings across 18 appearances, went 3-1 with a 0.57 ERA, converted 10 saves, 34 strikeouts to 8 walks. So walk rate was a little bit higher. It was 2.3 walks per 9 innings, but the strikeout rate was right in line with what he did this year, 9.7. It's very rare to see a dude go from the minors to the major, or from college to the majors with around the exact same strikeout numbers. That's just rare. But again, it's a different role. He was a closer at Nebraska. He would play shortstop for the first 8 innings, and then he would come in and pitch the 9th, or sometimes pitch the 8th and the 9th or whatever. And then after the draft, had to go down for Tommy John surgery. So he missed all of 2022 and coming back in 23, getting 65 innings and then jumping 100 and like over 100 innings off of that is a significant workload increase. And usually when you're trying to increase a guy's workload year over year, the rule of thumb, and Atlanta doesn't really subscribe to just this blanket rule, but the rule of thumb is really trying to contain the increase to about 50 or 60 innings, right? If you threw 60 last year, we're eyeballing 110 this year. We're trying to prevent you taking a massive jump like this. Now, Atlanta works a little bit differently. They don't just put in this blanket number. They instead are trying to, they're looking at biomechanical markers. They're looking at different things that they internally have identified become bigger issues when a player is dealing with fatigue, even if they don't necessarily feel it themselves, to determine when you need to have your workload cut back. And Atlanta really tried to manage his workload this year. Spencer Schwellenbach made exactly 4 starts in the majors on regular rest, on 4 days rest. Everything, he made 12 on 5 days rest, and he made 2 on 6 days of rest. And if I remember right, he didn't make his first start on regular rest until close to the end of the season. I think the first one that he did was either August 2nd or August 27th. And again, he came up in late May. They, just like every other guy in this rotation, they really, with the exception of Max Fried, because Max Fried likes his routine, they tried to give additional rest to Chris Sale, to Spencer Schwellenbach, to Renato Lopez, to all these guys. And Schwellenbach touched on this later in the year. He said that having a rotation full of veterans really made it easy for him to understand how to pace himself to get through a season, right? He said, he sort of bullpen. He said, if I throw more than 15 pitches, Chris Sale gets mad at me. These veterans understand, hey, here's the work, the amount of work you need to do to make sure you are sharp for your next outing without overworking yourself between outings. So that's a benefit there. But I don't really think anybody thought he was going to be this good this quickly. I'm going to read you some quotes that beat writer Justin Toscano of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, our preferred beat writer here on the show, got for an article came out, I think, about a week or two ago. Him and Gabe Burns collaborated on this article. Just some quotes from different members of the roster, the coaching staff, things like that, about how good Spencer Schwellenbach was this year. From Chris Sale, quote, I think he could be an absolute bona fide ace in this league. It just seems like he's figuring out how to use his stuff and compete with what he's got. It's impressive because some guys, it takes 5 years to figure that out. It took him 5 starts to figure it out. He's smart. He's very aware. He's freakishly athletic too, which helps a lot. And you can see Schwellenbach's athleticism. Again, he was the starting shortstop at Nebraska. His defense is there. He was nominated for, I think it's the Fielding Bible Defensive Award at pitcher, was the first runner-up. I think it was Tanner Bybee, the Guardians. I don't remember who it was, but he was like the first runner-up on it, despite having significantly less innings than everybody else, because his defense is so good, his athleticism is so good. But on the Chris Sale note of him taking 5 starts to figure it out, through the end of June, he had made 6 starts, but you noticed a trend in a lot of these where he would be cruising in that final inning. He would struggle a little bit. Against Boston on June 5th, 6 runs on 7 hits and 4 2/3. He was done in by that final inning. Against St. Louis, 4 runs on 8 hits and 5 innings on June 24th. Against Pittsburgh on June 30th, 4 runs on 5 hits and 5 innings. He was really having to figure out, when you got to a dude a second time, maybe a third time, how to put them away. And I think a lot of the issue was figuring out what to do with 2 strikes, how to get that third strike on a guy, right? To Chris Sale's point, he figured it out. From that point on, starting July 6th through the end of the year, Spencer Schwellenbach pitched to a 2.54 ERA, went 9-6 with 14 walks to 95 strikeouts. Absolutely figured it out. And while you could see the fatigue start to get to him a little bit down in August and September, you really could see it by the walk numbers. That's where I really noticed the fatigue. It felt like either when he would miss, like he would be a little bit less consistent at getting a pitch in the shadow of the zone. Remember the attack zones conversation for the Michael Harris episode? He'd be a little less consistent about landing a pitch in the shadow, or he'd get hard hit because a pitch would leak a little too far inside into the heart of the plate. But the fatigue stuff here. In July, 26 innings, 1 walk, 28 strikeouts, 2.08 ERA. In August, 29 and a third innings, so 3.1 more, 8 walks, but he struck out 42, 3.07 ERA. September, 36 and 2/3 innings, 5 walks, struck out 25, 2.45 ERA. Obviously, they felt comfortable with what he was able to do. He started that game 1 of that doubleheader on the Monday against the Mets. We didn't lose because of him. It was an 8-7 loss, but he allowed 1 run on 4 hits in 7 innings with no walks and 5 strikeouts. Dude was just nails every time he went out there. And to Chris Sale's point about him figuring stuff out, he also added pitches in the majors. And so this is now a legitimate 6-pitch mix, okay? He wasn't throwing a sinker in the minors. He added a sinker in the majors. And if I remember right, I think he debuted around game 5 or 6, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, something like that. And so, again, legitimate 6-pitch mix. And like I talk about on the show a lot, he throws a lot of different fastballs. 4-seam fastball, most commonly used pitch, averages 96.1 mile an hour on it, 29.1% usage last year, 240 batting average allowed. Slider averages 87, just under 20% usage. I love me a good hard slider. The harder you throw a slider, the better. It's great. 87, I'd much rather have that than an 84. Hard sliders generally do better. You come up from that slider, and a velocity band between the slider and the 4-seamer is the cutter, 92.9%, or 92.9 mile an hour, 16.8% usage. So right there at 17% usage. Curveball, just over 80 miles an hour, 80.6 average, 15% usage, rounding here. Splitter, I think his splitter is fantastic. I think it could get a little bit better, but I still think it's a really good splitter. 84.5 miles an hour was the best performing pitch by batting average allowed, 147 batting average allowed on the splitter, 12.8% usage. And then that sinker at 95 miles an hour, just under 7% usage. Again, 6-pitch mix. 3 of these are curveballs. 2 of these are breaking balls. You also have an off-speed pitch there in the splitter. Love this arsenal. And again, he tweaked these things. He added to this arsenal mid-season. He added that sinker in the majors. That is incredibly rare for a dude this young to be able to develop and whip out a new pitch mid-season. But very exciting that he was able to do that. And you could really see how he was able to adjust what he did for the opponent. His 2 second-half starts against Philly were his 2 lowest fastball usage starts of the season because they hit fastballs really well. He went a lot of slider, a lot of curve, splitter, and when they got fastballs, they were getting sinkers and not 4-seamers. He really adjusted what he did from start to start, and having that large arsenal can do that for you. In just a minute, let's talk about why you would give him a contract extension, why AA would be incentivized to do it, and what the deal might look like. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Encase Cards. This is a custom card manufacturer. Encase Cards takes the source photos of whatever you want to immortalize in card form. For me, it's U Sports. My daughter plays soccer, U10 soccer. My son plays t-ball. And so I sent in their player photos from Picture Day to Encase Cards. Their artists went in there, personalized it. They gave us background options to choose from. They put on demographic information, the team information, my son's positions, all that kind of stuff. And then they print these cards on high quality cardstock, they slab them, and they ship them to you as a keepsake. So go check them out, ncasecards.com. That's ncasccards.com. And I want to thank our friends over at Encase Cards for sponsoring Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby breaking down Spencer Schwellenbach and why the Atlanta Braves should give him a contract extension after only 1 year of service. And the thing to know here about Spencer Schwellenbach, the point I was trying to make in that first segment was not just he's really good, but was also the fact that he has shown a propensity to get significantly better, quickly. He has been able to take significant development leaps mid-season, right? He acclimated from Double-A to the majors in 5 starts, and he only had 2 starts in Double-A. A month before he came up, he was pitching in High-A Rome, and he came in the majors, and within 5 or 6 starts, looked like he belonged in the majors. And his ability to add pitches, his ability to sequence really well, the great control that he has, I think is something where you can see how he could rapidly evolve into a frontline starting pitcher, right? You would trust him right now to start a postseason game. If I'm picking a rotation for next year, not knowing the condition of Spencer Strider or when he will return, my opening day rotation, I probably have Spencer Schwellenbach pitching one of the first 3 games. It's probably Chris Sale on opening day, and then it's probably Ronaldo Lopez and Spencer Schwellenbach. They're in my top 3. Now, again, we don't know if Strider's going to be in there or not. We don't know what's going to happen in free agency. You may bring in a veteran. You may bring Max Fried back. I don't know. But as of right now, Schwellenbach's a playoff starter for me going into 25. And to do that so young, again, is, now I'm not going to say unprecedented, but is amazing. And so I think the reason that AA would do a contract extension is, one, you don't know how good he's going to be, but you have a feeling he could be really good. And so if you sign him to the deal now, it allows you to get, I'm not going to say underpriced, but it allows you to get value on the deal versus having to pay not full market price, but pay arbitration salaries. The big reason Atlanta would want to extend Schwellenbach now is for the financial certainty. The Atlanta Braves under Alex Anthopoulos like to know what the future rosters are going to be. You have so many players that are signed long-term. They want to know what they are going to be paying next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Right now, where you sit on this roster, there are, like, I'm using Fangraphs here to look at the 2024 payroll and the projected 2025 payroll. You have 5 players that are arbitration eligible. That's it. Ramon Laureano, who may or may not be back. Kevin Biggio, who definitely is not going to be back at a projected $4.3 million. Huascar Yanoa, we've had that conversation. We don't know if he'll be back or not, simply because of the options and his ability to stick at the major league level. Jared Kelenic should be back. He won't be too expensive. Dylan Lee's definitely going to be back for the bullpen, right? But if you think about the way that this team likes to work, they don't like carrying extra guys who are arbitration eligible. Think about last year. A lot of those guys that were arbitration eligible that had questionable roles, right? Your Nicky Lopez, right? Your Michael Soroka. Guys that were probably not going to be either in the rotation or everyday starters. You shipped them out. You shipped a lot of guys out. You cleared out the 40-man roster, but you shipped those guys out. And it's because you don't get financial certainty with guys who have multiple years of arbitration ahead of you, right? The roster this year, like this season, 2024, the arbitration eligible guys that you had on this roster, you had Max Fried, you had AJ Minter. I think that was it. Huascar Yanoa, maybe. Yeah, Huascar Yanoa had a deal. That was an ARB 1. Okay, so Huascar Yanoa as well. You didn't have a lot of guys that were arbitration eligible. When Orlando Arcia won the starting job at shortstop, they signed him to a 3-year deal. And also, all of the deals that Atlanta has signed, they don't have player options. They don't have vesting options. They have club options or nothing. Because Atlanta wants to be able to confidently go into the future and say, this is how much money we have committed in every season. Again, using Fangraphs numbers, in 2025, players with guaranteed contracts, we have $168,734,524 committed to players with guaranteed contracts. In 2027, we have $75,866,667 committed to players with guaranteed contracts. When somebody gets to arbitration, you do not have full control over what their salary is. If you go to a hearing, you could lose the hearing. That makes it hard to plan. And with a player that you think is going to be really good, and obviously the number one guy here, we've seen an example of this, is Spencer Strider, it benefits you to sign an early extension so that you can lock in exactly what that player's values are going to be. Strider signed for 6 years and $75 million. It's an average annual value of $12.5 million because that is the total dollar amount divided by the number of years. But that's not how much he's making every single season. That's the average. Atlanta said, we want to buy out some of your arbitration and free agency. Okay. So his yearly salary was $1 million. And then it escalates to $4 million. So Spencer Strider in 2024 made $1 million. In 2025, it jumped to $4 million. That is a raise over what he would have made as a minimum salary player in 2025. It's a raise in 2024 over what he would have made as a minimum salary player. And then when arbitration years get here, which would have been 2026, 2027, 2028 for Spencer Strider, he will make $20 million, $22 million, and $22 million. Atlanta said, we want to buy out some of your arbitration and free agency years, right? We bought out a free agent year at $22 million. If you exercise the club option for his 2029 season at $22 million, we'd buy out a second free agent year. But the idea here was, you're so good, we don't know what you would earn in arbitration. It could be really high. And 2, we want some cost certainty. We want to know exactly what our payroll will be in the future. And so what Atlanta did is they said, okay, we're going to pay you when we don't have to pay you. We can keep you here for 6 seasons of team control and then let you walk in free agency. It's the Max Fried situation. Also with Max Fried, he's gone to arbitration for 3 straight years. Atlanta did not know what his salary was going to be unless they either settled before arbitration or finished a hearing. Atlanta won one of those hearings. Atlanta lost one of those hearings. Atlanta settled before arbitration in one of those hearings. As they entered the offseason, they did not know how much Max Fried was going to cost them. It's not a situation that Alex Anthopoulos apparently is comfortable doing. So Spencer Strider, they gave him money. They gave him more money than they possibly would have had to pay him in arbitration, but they get cost certainty going forward. He gets more money now than he would have gotten as a league minimum player. Again, it's something like $740,000 you have to pay these guys. Like, your first couple years in the league, you don't have to pay them hardly anything, and they have no say. They cannot negotiate at all. You just tender them a contract. So the cost certainty is why Atlanta would want to extend Spencer Schwellenbach. And you'll notice Spencer Strider's money never exceeds $22 million, just like Austin Riley's, just like Matt Olson's, just Chris Sale's extension brought his 25 salary down to $22 million. Nobody who's signed long-term on this team is set to make more than $22 million. Nobody who has signed under Alex Anthopoulos has made more than $22 million since the 1-year, $23 million deal for Josh Donaldson in 2019. I'm going to argue that a Spencer Schwellenbach extension would be comparable, but I think slightly less than Spencer Strider. Spencer Strider came off of a season where he had 131 and 2/3 innings with an 11-5 record, a 2.67 ERA, and 202 strikeouts, 13.8 per nine, compared to 45 walks, 3.1 per nine. More strikeouts in less innings than Schwellenbach, but more walks. I'm going to argue that Schwellenbach's deal would be a little bit cheaper, but would be in the same ballpark. You would be looking at another deal that would probably be around 6 years, maybe 70 million, 68, 69 million, with the club option attached to the end. And the reason for that is if you don't sign him, you don't know what his salaries are going to escalate to. He could become more expensive. If Schwellenbach goes out and wins the Cy Young in his third season, right? Then when he hits arbitration that very next year, it would be incredibly expensive, right? He would probably shoot up into different strata of salary that we have not necessarily had to pay, right? Look at Corbin Burns. Corbin Burns is a guy that his salaries, his first year of arbitration, $6.5 million, he settled. Then $10 million in arbitration, and then $15 settling before arbitration. Max Fried got $15 million. You don't know what Schwellenbach would do. Typically, those salaries go up every year in arbitration. It's all based off of the performance you have in the year before arbitration. But Atlanta does not like the uncertainty. The only caveat here, caveat of not signing Spencer Schwellenbach that AA may be thinking about, I haven't talked to him about this, we don't know, is the injury to Spencer Strider this year may give him some pause about the idea of signing another pitcher to a long-term deal. I do think if there's any pitcher to do that to, it is Spencer Schwellenbach because he adjusted so quickly. He is very athletic. He does already have one Tommy John behind him. He had that Tommy John after he got drafted. To me, it makes sense to sign the deal. If you're Spencer Schwellenbach, I think it makes sense to sign the deal depending on what the offer is. I would expect it to come in somewhere around Strider's, maybe a little bit lower. Maybe it's 65 instead of 75. Maybe it's 70 instead of 75. But I absolutely could see signing Spencer Schwellenbach to a 6-year extension with a club option that would get you an extra year or two of control over what you would have if he were to just play it out and go to arbitration every year, as well as giving you cost certainty so that you know going forward exactly how much you have committed in 26, in 27, and in 28. Because if a guy goes to arbitration, you don't get that. Let me know what you think. If you think we should sign Spencer Schwellenbach, let me know what you think the deal should be. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Braves_today. Again, Facebook page and Instagram as well. You can put them on there. You can even email us, contact@bravestoday.com. And again, I want to hear your questions. We're going to do a mailbag on Friday. It's Listener Friday. So your show ideas, your questions, things like that, send them to us and we will talk about it. But until next time, this has been Braves Today.